Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be doing some predictions for the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. So, if you are newer to my channel, you may not know that every year I read along with the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction. It is my favourite literary prize. I love it for many reasons, partly just because I love historical fiction and I love discovering new works of historical fiction, but also because I think it's a really wonderful prize in its variety. It's really great for having a mix of very big name authors who are well known and a lot of people you've never heard of. It's really good for having a mix of, you know, the big companies you expect to see on book prizes and some really small presses. There's usually a mix of sort of very literary historical fiction and more kind of reading group accessible historical fiction. And in general, whenever I read along with the Walter Scott Prize for Historical Fiction Longlist, I always discover some wonderful new gems. I'm pretty sure every one of my favourites videos over the last few years at the end of the year have included books that I read because it was on the Walter Scott Prize Longlist. So this, I think, will be the 6th time that I've read along with the Walter Scott Prize Longlist, and I'm really looking forward to the Longlist being announced, I think on the 18th of February, and I thought it would be fun to create some predictions. So before anything else, let me quickly go through the criteria for the Walter Scott Prize. So their statement kind of from their website is, the Walter Scott Prize celebrates quality of writing in the English language and is open to novels published in the previous year in the UK, Ireland or the Commonwealth, reflecting the subtitle "To 60 Years Since" of Walter Scott's famous work Waverley. The majority of the storyline must be set at least 60 years ago. The Walter Scott Prize is very hard to predict because, as I said, it often includes a lot of books that are not very well known or are from smaller presses, and often there'll be a book which is kind of out somewhere else in the world but isn't out in the UK yet. Last year, however, I did a predictions video for the first time and guessed correctly 4 books out of the long list of I think 13, which I was quite proud of. So I thought I would do another predictions video this year. So I have a few books that I think might make it onto the Walter Scott Prize. I don't know how many I'll be right about this year, we'll see. I tried to keep this list to like 12 or 13 books because that's usually how long the long list is for the Walter Scott Prize, but I have ended up with 14 books and that's fine, isn't it? It's also quite hard to predict because I kept thinking about a lot of the like biggest historical fiction releases of the last year, and a lot of them, you know, books like North Woods by Daniel Mason or Janes by Percival Everett are by American authors who aren't eligible for the Walter Scott Prize. But I have come up with a long list of some books that might be on the long list, some of which I would really like to see on the long list. Some of these I've read, some of these I haven't. So first off, I have a few books that came out last year that are from previous Walter Scott Prize long listees. So these are authors who've been longlisted for the Walter Scott Prize before. They had a new book out last year. I think they are a relatively decent chance to be on the long list this year. So here we have Precipice by Robert Harris. I haven't read this yet. This isn't technically on my TBR, it's on my husband Nick's TBR, but I'm sure he won't mind if I borrow it if it's longlisted for the prize or indeed at any point. So Robert Harris has been shortlisted for the Walter Scott Prize several times before, most recently for his novel Act of Oblivion, which I absolutely loved. I thought it was incredible. And this is his new historical novel that came out in 2024 and it's set in 1914. And I believe it's about a young woman who is having a love affair with the Prime Minister and he is telling her state secrets that she may or may not be giving away. So I think it's going to be, you know, in Robert Harris's usual style, thrilling and exciting, possibly some sort of historical spy drama. That's what I'm kind of anticipating here, and it sounds great. Colm Tobin has also been on the Walter Scott Prize longlist in the past. I read his novel The Magician when it was shortlisted a few years ago and really enjoyed it. And he had a novel out last year which has been very celebrated, Long Island. This is the sequel to his novel Brooklyn, which is exceptionally famous, and Brooklyn, I know, is set in like 1950s Ireland and New York, so I assume that Long Island is set in 1950s, maybe 1960s New York. It is called Long Island. I don't know very much about it, and because I haven't read Brooklyn, I'm relatively keen not to know too much about Long Island. I guess if this is on the long list, I might read Brooklyn first, but We'll see. One novel that I think is very high up on my predictions list, I think there's a very good chance of this making the long list. This is There Are Rivers in the Sky by Elif Shafak. So her novel, The Architect's Apprentice, was longlisted back in 2015. And There Are Rivers in the Sky just sounds like so much of a Walter Scott book. And it also sounds great. I really want to read it. This is actually also not technically on my TBR. This is, again, Nick's book that I have pinched from his TBR. This is a sweeping novel that spans from the 19th century to the modern times, looking at three characters living on the banks of different rivers, whose lives are all like impacted by the Epic of Gilgamesh. I have no idea really what to expect from this book from that, but doesn't that sound kind of cool? I feel like, having read along with the Walter Scott Prize for many years, it is a very hard prize to predict, and it's really varied, which I love, but I just feel like this is a Walter Scott Prize kind of novel. I say that, I've just had a look at the description in the front of the book. There's a character in Victorian London, there's a character in 2014, there's a character in 2018, so it is possible that less than half this book is set in the past, and therefore it wouldn't be eligible for the Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction. But I think maybe there's also some stuff set in the ancient world, so I don't know, basically, but if more than half of this is historical, then I feel like this is a good shout for the prize, and regardless, I do really want to read it. Another historical author who's been on the prize long list before is Andrew Miller. His novel, Now We Should Be Entirely Free, was on the shortlist several years ago, and I just absolutely loved it. One of my favourite books that I've read from the Walter Scott Prize. And he had a new book out last year in 2024, and it's set in 1962, so it just sneaks in eligibility-wise. And I've heard great things about it, especially from Roz from Scally Dandling About the Books, and also Eric Carl Anderson. Don't even think I've said what the book is called yet. The Land in Winter, that's Andrew Miller's new book. And apparently it is about two couples who find themselves cut off from the rest of their village during the very, very cold, snowy winter of 1962. And it's about their relationships. And it just sounds really interesting. I've heard good things. I like Andrew Miller a lot. I feel like there's a chance this might be on the long list. Then there was also Stacey Halls. She had a new novel out last year, The Household, and her previous novel, Mrs. England, was longlisted for the Walter Scott Prize a couple of years ago. I have a proof copy here of The Household. I'll put the final cover up on the screen as well. Unlike the previous four I've just mentioned, I have read The Household. It's a wonderful, wonderful novel. It's set in the Victorian period, and it's about the house for impoverished women that Charles Dickens founded. But it's not about Charles Dickens. He doesn't really appear in the book. It's more about the women in the home, and also about the real-life heiress who Charles Dickens started this place with, Angela Burdett Coutts. She was more involved in the day-to-day running of the home than Charles Dickens was, though he helped kind of with the fundraising for it. And this book is all about the women living in Lurano Cottage, and about Angela's life as well. And it's fantastic. It's just really, really, really good. I would love to see this on the Walter Scott Prize for historical fiction longlist this year, so we will see. Then, talking of wonderful novels that I have already read, there are three novels, two of which I've read, one of which I'm partway through at the moment, which I think could be possibilities for the Walter Scott Prize long list. One is The Beholders by Hester Musson. Again, I'm holding up a proof copy. I'll put the final cover on the screen. This, like The Household, is a novel set in Victorian Britain, and this is a debut novel, a sort of Victorian thriller about a housemaid uncovering the very dark, messy, troubled secrets of the house she works in. And it's so good and so pacey and so well done, and I would love to see this on the Walter Scott Prize long list. I feel like it is rarer for a debut novel to make it onto the long list, but this is really so good. And actually the next two are debuts as well. So one novel I think is a possibility for the Walter Scott Prize is Sparks of Bright Matter by Leanne O'Donnell. This is a novel set in Ireland and England in the 18th century, about a alchemist and a sex worker and a mysterious book. It's a wonderful, wonderful novel, and it is also like quite a Walter Scott Prize book. Again, hard to explain exactly what I mean by that, but having read along with the prize for several years, I do think that Sparks of Bright Matter is quite a Walter Scott Prize kind of book, so we will see, we will see. And then another book I think might make the prize long list, which I'm currently listening to on audiobook, is Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. This is a novel that has had a lot of buzz and hype around it. I believe it's already won quite a few awards, and it is great. And it is I think, quite a Walter Scott Prize book. The Glorious Exploits is set in ancient Sicily, and it's about two young men who are guarding Athenian prisoners of war who have been imprisoned in the quarries following a failed invasion attempt from Athens. And these two men, one of them is obsessed with Greek tragedy and Athenian tragedy, and he decides that they're going to put on a play using the Athenian prisoners as their actors. And it's both like very funny and exceptionally dark, and the way it looks at like power dynamics is so grim but so well done. And also, for a novel set in ancient Sicily, it is exceptionally Irish, and that is a really fun, clever aspect of it, because why shouldn't it be? None of them are speaking English anyway. They're probably all speaking in Latin. Like, it doesn't matter which bit of English they are speaking in, and they're speaking in an Irish variety of English here, and it's very effective. And also, obviously, like, Sicily is an island off a mainland, so that feels quite appropriate. And I just feel like, because it's quite an unusual book, and it's got a lot of really interesting themes, and the kind of writing style is very distinctive, I just feel like this could be a Walter Scott Prize book, so we will see. There are also usually quite a few Irish writers on the Walter Scott Prize long list, and I feel like Ferdia Lennon might be one of them this year. Then I have two other books, both also by Irish authors, that are on my physical TBR that I think could make the Walter Scott Prize long list this year. So here we have Bright I Burn by Molly Aitken. This is a novel set in 13th century Ireland, and it's inspired by the true story of the first person in Ireland to be accused of witchcraft. I haven't heard too many people talking about this book, but as I said, the Walter Scott Prize do usually have a mix of books that there's been a lot of hype about and books that there hasn't been any hype about at all, so I don't think that necessarily means anything. I just feel like this could potentially be a Walter Scott Prize kind of book. Basically, I would quite like to see it on the long list because it's on my TBR, but, you know, we will see. I also have here The Heart in Winter by Kevin Barry. This is a novel set in the 1890s in the US, and looks at a group of Irish immigrants in Montana struggling over a harsh winter, I believe. This is one I've heard more about, and I feel like I've heard quite a lot of people speak quite positively about it. Again, I would kind of like to see it on the long list because it's on my TBR, and I would quite like to read it soon and have some prompting to read it soon. But, you know, we will see. Then I have four other books that I haven't read, don't have on my TBR, but have heard good things about and think possibly might be on the Walter Scott Prize long list. So one of these is The Tower by Flora Carr. This is a feminist retelling of the story of Mary, Queen of Scots. I hear very, very good things about this one, have been meaning to read it for a while, and it is a book that has been on lots of lists of like best historical fiction of 2024 and that kind of thing, so I feel like there's a chance it might be on the Walter Scott Prize long list, hard to say. Another 2024 historical fiction release I'm keen to read that could be on the long list is House of Shades by Leanne Dilsworth. This novel is set in London in 1833 and follows Doctoress Hester Reeves as she is offered a mysterious commission that could change her life forever. I read Leanne Dilsworth's debut novel, The Theatre of Marvels, a couple of years ago. Really, really loved it. And I do really want to read her second one. So I would be very excited to see this on the long list. And as I said, very hard long list to predict. There's also A Sign of Her Own by Sarah Marsh. This is a debut novel that came out last year. This novel follows the character of Ellen. Ellen is deaf, and she used to work with Alexander Graham Bell. And this book kind of looks at the story of Alexander Graham Bell's work with deaf people. And I think it's about Ellen kind of telling the story of Bell's betrayal of her in his pursuit of his ambitions. This sounds really interesting. Another one I've been meaning to read for a while, and it would be really nice to see this on the Walter Scott Prize long list. And then finally, recently I heard Charlotte from Coney Reed talking about a novel called The Instrumentalist by Harriet Constable, which sounded great. And I feel like since I heard Charlotte talking about it, I now keep seeing it everywhere. So I feel like there is a chance that this one might end up on the Walter Scott Prize long list. This novel is about a young woman called Anna Maria who has kind of nothing but her musical talents to get her through life, and she is being taught by Vivaldi. But as Anna Maria becomes more and more successful, she threatens to like eclipse her teacher, and he is not happy about that, and everything goes on from there. I've just heard great things. It sounds like a really, really interesting novel, and I always love a book about music, so I feel like that would be a great one to see on the Walter Scott Prize long list. So those are 14 books that could potentially be on the long list for the Walter Scott Prize. I imagine I will have got like between 0 and 2 books correct. I don't imagine I would have got as many correct as I did last year. I think I had a bit of a fluke there, but you know, it's fun to come up with predictions anyway, and it's a nice way to kind of remind myself of 2024 historical fiction releases that I really enjoyed or that I'm excited to read. So we all wait and see what happens when the Walter Scott Prize longlist is announced on the 18th of February. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's on it and thinking about what I want to read from it. Do let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. That's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.